My husband was furious when I casually mentioned to his parents, he's moving in with his assistant, didn't he tell you? The room went silent. His dad gritted his teeth. I added, don't worry, I'm keeping the house. My name's Laurel. I turned 47 last November, and I've lived in Asheville, North Carolina, nearly my entire life. Born here, raised here, built a life here with a man I thought I knew. I used to tell myself we were lucky, that in a world where so many things came apart, we'd stayed together. 22 years of marriage, 2 grown kids, a house with wide windows and a wraparound porch. I designed every inch of it myself. My business is interior design, has been for over a decade now. Nothing high profile, just homes around the area, a few mountain retreats. I always found peace in quiet beauty. My husband, Emery, works in tech sales. He's the sort who charms a room without trying. Tall, silver at the temples, always impeccably dressed. Over the years, I watched him become the man people listened to, the kind who didn't need to shout to get what he wanted. Somewhere in there, the version of him I first fell in love with, softened, blurred. I should have noticed the signs. The missed calls. The last-minute business trips. The sudden absences he never used to have. But when you've built a life with someone, you don't go looking for cracks. You learn to walk carefully over them. Quietly. So you don't fall through. Until one day you do. It was an ordinary Tuesday when I found out. That's the worst part. It wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on a collar. No stranger calling me at night. Just a simple mistake in syncing devices. Emery was in Denver, or so I thought. I was looking for a flight confirmation on the iPad, something about Myra's upcoming visit home from college. I didn't expect to see a message pop up. I miss your skin. Counting the hours until Friday. It didn't register at first. I assumed it was spam or something meant for someone else. Then the messages kept coming. Emery's name was at the top. His words, his voice, just typed out for someone else. Her name was Nola. I remembered her. His new assistant. Young, quiet, polite. She came to the Christmas party last year and brought fudge. I had thought she was shy. I didn't cry, not then. I read every message. Every emoji. I can't wait to wake up next to you again. I sat there until the room darkened around me, until the only light was the screen in my hands. The pain didn't come like a wave. It settled like dust, slow, suffocating, in every corner of my chest. But I didn't say a word. Instead, I cleaned the kitchen. I answered emails. I made a list for groceries. And when Emery called that night, I picked up and said, "How's Denver?" He told me about a steakhouse he'd gone to. I told him to bring back something for Josiah. And then I started planning. I found a lawyer 2 towns over. Quiet, thorough, efficient. We met in her office on a rainy Thursday. She wore flat shoes and didn't make small talk. I appreciated that. I laid it all out. The texts, the names, the timeline. I explained how I'd contributed financially, how I'd given up full-time work when the kids were younger. I explained how I had designed and renovated every square foot of our home. She nodded, took notes, asked questions I hadn't considered. "What do you want?" she asked me at the end. "Peace," I said. "And the house." The next few weeks were a blur. I gathered paperwork. I smiled through dinners. I kissed Emery's cheek when he came home late. I waited for the right moment. And it came. Emery had planned Sunday lunch at his parents' home. They lived in Brevard, in a brick colonial with ivy-covered walls and matching garden chairs. It was a regular thing. Francine made roast chicken. Harold told the same jokes. His sister Bernice would show up with Clark and a store-bought pie. I wore a cream blouse, the one Emery liked. I brought my potato salad. Everything felt as it always had, predictable. Until dessert. Francine had just asked me if Emery and I were still planning to renovate the kitchen this year. I stirred my spoon in my cobbler, let it hang in the silence. Then I said, very calmly, "Oh, that's probably off now that he's moving in with his assistant. Didn't he tell you?" The air left the room. Francine looked like I'd spoken in tongues. Clark froze. Bernice actually dropped her napkin. Emery didn't speak. His face drained of color. But it was Harold I watched. The way he clenched his jaw. His eyes darkening. I added, without a hint of venom, "Don't worry. I'm keeping the house." Then I took another bite. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the entire family had been caught in a photograph. Emery stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. He didn't say a word. Just grabbed his jacket and keys and walked out the front door. Francine called after him. Bernice looked at me with disbelief, like I had ruined everything. But Harold. He looked at me for a long time. Then, finally, he muttered under his breath, "He's a goddamn fool." That's when I knew. I hadn't just blown up my marriage, I'd opened a crack in their carefully constructed image. And they saw it, too. The days after that were strange. Emery texted. He called. His tone shifted between fury and pleading. You humiliated me, one message read. Another, you want to destroy our family? Then, finally, we need to talk. When he came over, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. I made coffee. We sat in silence for a while. He started to explain. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't go looking for it. I didn't interrupt. Nola just. I don't know. She listened. She saw me. I saw you too, I said. You just stopped being someone I recognized. He stared at his mug. I didn't want to hurt you, he said softly. You didn't want to tell the truth. We didn't yell. We didn't cry. We were two people sitting in the ruins of what used to be, quietly admitting it was over. Dividing the assets was uglier than I expected. Emery wanted to sell the house. Said it was the most logical solution. I disagreed. So did my lawyer. Eventually, he gave up. Maybe because of guilt. Maybe because of the threat of court. Maybe because he saw the version of me that didn't flinch anymore. He moved out for good. Nola wasn't with him when he came to get his things. Just a moving truck and a friend from work. He didn't say goodbye. And just like that, after 22 years, I was alone in my house. But it didn't feel lonely. The first night by myself, I lit every lamp. I opened every window. I played music too loud. I sat on the back porch with a glass of red wine and watched the trees sway in the wind. There was silence. But it didn't feel empty. It felt clean. The kids came home a week later. I told them the truth, simple and clear. Mira cried. Josiah asked if I wanted him to slash some tires. I laughed for the first time in weeks. I started going for morning walks. I repainted the guest bedroom. I planted new herbs in the garden. I started sleeping better. I started sleeping in the middle of the bed. Spring came in early that year, like it was trying to apologize for the winter. I remember the air softening, the sun feeling warmer than it should have for March. I started spending more time outside. Mornings on the porch with coffee. Afternoons in the garden, pulling weeds I used to pay someone else to take care of. There was something about digging my hands into the earth that made everything else feel manageable. I began noticing the house again, not just the walls and furniture, but the way light shifted through the rooms depending on the time of day. I repainted the hallway a deeper shade of blue, one Emery would have hated. I had a cabinet maker install custom bookshelves in my office. Not for anyone else's benefit, just because I'd always wanted them. People started calling, asking if I was taking new design clients. I'd let the business slow down over the years, too many dinners to make, too many things to manage at home. But now I said yes. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed something to anchor myself to. My first project was a bungalow renovation near Lake Junaluska. A retired couple, sweet as anything, who wanted the place to feel like a home again. I worked with them for weeks, and by the time we were done, they invited me to stay for dinner and sent me home with blueberry pie. It felt good, in a quiet, honest way. Every so often, I'd get updates about Emery. Not from him, but through the grapevine. A mutual friend mentioned seeing him and Nola at a brewery in Boone. Someone else said he was looking tired lately. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want them. But then one morning, about 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call. It was Bernice, his sister. I hadn't heard from her since the infamous Sunday lunch. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Laurel, she said, her voice tighter than usual. Hey, I hope this isn't a bad time. I could already feel something brewing in her tone. I'm fine, I said, setting down my coffee. What's going on? There was a long pause. I just thought you should know. Nola left him. I didn't say anything. She moved out. Apparently it got messy. Emery's not doing well. I waited for her to explain why she was telling me this. I just figured you'd want to know. In case what? Another pause. In case he reaches out. I almost laughed. Thanks for the update, I said, then hung up. I sat there for a while, staring out at the trees. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. The next day, Emery called. I didn't answer. Then came the text. Emery, can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Eventually, I replied. Me, about what? His response came quickly. Emery, everything. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what everything meant. It wasn't just about the divorce. It was about the pieces of his life falling apart in places he hadn't expected. And I could feel it, his desire to loop me back in. To make me part of his unraveling. Not out of love, but out of habit. Out of desperation. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and turned my phone off. The The stars were out, and the wind carried the smell of something blooming. I thought about the first time Emery brought me flowers. I was 23. We were in line at a gas station, and he bought me a little bouquet of daisies in a plastic wrap. I remember how he looked at me back then, like I was a possibility, not a guarantee. And I realized I'd stopped being a possibility to him a long time ago. Somewhere along the line, I became a backdrop. Familiar, expected, quiet, but not anymore. In the following weeks, I saw Emery only once, by chance. I was leaving the co-op with groceries, and he was walking in. He looked thinner. Not unhealthy, just weathered. Like he hadn't figured out how to dress himself without someone else's influence. We made eye contact. He offered a small smile. I nodded, kept walking. He didn't follow me. That night, I didn't dream about him. Not in sadness, not in anger. Just nothing. Like the part of me that had been tied to him finally released the tension. Around that time, I got a call from Harold, Emery's father. We hadn't spoken since the lunch, but he'd sent me a card during the holidays. Inside, in his uneven handwriting, he'd written, "Always thought you had more backbone than the rest of us. Keep walking tall." I hadn't responded. But now he was calling. "I'm coming into town next week," he said. "Thought maybe we could grab lunch." I was quiet for a second. "Just lunch," he added. Not trying to stir up anything. So I agreed. We met at a little diner near the river. The kind of place where the waitress calls you Han, whether she knows you or not. Harold looked older than I remembered, but there was something steadier about him now, like he'd finally let go of whatever pride he'd been clinging to. We talked for over an hour. About everything and nothing. About how Francine was adjusting. About how he couldn't bring himself to take Emery's side. About how he'd always respected me, even if he'd never said it. Before we parted, he touched my arm gently. "You did what most people don't have the guts to do," he said. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded. When I got home that afternoon, the light was pouring through the kitchen window. I looked around at the quiet, the stillness, the peace I had carved out for myself. The world hadn't fallen apart. It had just changed shape. And I was still standing. About a month after lunch with Harold, something unexpected happened. I got an invitation to speak at a local women's business panel in Asheville. It was for a community event called Rooted and Rising that supported women entrepreneurs in the area. I was surprised. They wanted me to talk about my design business and rebuilding after personal setbacks. Apparently, someone had recommended me after seeing one of my renovation projects featured in a local magazine. My first instinct was to say no. I didn't think of myself as someone who gave talks or shared wisdom on a stage. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized maybe it was time. I had been living smaller for so long. Hiding behind things. Hiding even behind my own calm. So I said yes. The day of the panel, I wore a navy wrap dress and flats that made me feel grounded. The auditorium was filled with women of all ages, some just starting out, some with silver in their hair and stories behind their eyes. The moderator asked about design, about growth, about change. But then came the question I knew might come. How did you find the courage to rebuild your life after something as painful as betrayal? The room went quiet. I took a deep breath and answered as simply as I could. I stopped waiting for someone else to see me. And I started seeing myself again. That line ended up quoted in the local papers right up the next week. I got several messages from women afterward. Some were strangers. One had been married 35 years and said she hadn't spoken up for herself in at least 15. Another was in her 30s, contemplating whether to leave a fiancé who felt more like a plan than a partner. I realized then pain isolates, but truth connects. As I settled deeper into this new version of my life, I noticed that things didn't necessarily get easier, but I became better at carrying them. I stopped needing explanations from people who had chosen not to stay. I stopped replaying conversations in my head. Most days, anyway. Mira came home from college in early June. She had her mother's eyes and her father's sharpness. She was quieter since the divorce, more thoughtful, maybe. One evening, we sat on the back porch, and she asked me something I hadn't been prepared for. "Do you think you'll ever fall in love again?" I laughed softly. "I don't know, honey. Maybe, maybe not." She thought for a moment. "I just hope, if you do, it's with someone who sees all of you." I looked at her, surprised. Not just at the maturity of her words, but at the fact that she wasn't asking as a daughter, she was asking as a woman. "I hope that for you too," I said. That night, I lay awake thinking about it. I wasn't looking for love, but I had started noticing people again. Smiles. Laughter. The way someone held the door, or the way a man at the co-op hummed to himself while picking tomatoes. One of those people was Jamie. He was the contractor I'd hired for a new design project in Black Mountain, an old arts and crafts house being turned into a bed and breakfast. Mid-50s, lean, always smelled faintly of cedar and sawdust. He was the type who worked with his hands and didn't feel the need to fill silence with noise. We started off professional, polite, respectful, but somewhere in the middle of that project, the lines started to blur. It was little things at first. The way he offered me coffee without asking how I took it and got it exactly right. The way he listened when I rambled about tile samples. The way he stood next to me during final walkthroughs, not in front of me, not behind me, just beside me. One afternoon, the project was nearly done. We were going over some last-minute trim work, and I asked him about his life, what he did before contracting. He told me he used to be a math teacher. That after his wife passed 10 years ago, he left the classroom and started building because it gave him something solid to hold on to. He didn't say it with sadness, just honesty. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Later that evening, he sent a text. "Jamie, thanks for asking. Most people don't." That message sat with me. I realized I wanted to keep knowing him. I didn't jump into anything. I wasn't ready. I told him that clearly. He nodded, said, "I'm in no rush." We started seeing each other outside of work. Dinners that weren't dates, not exactly. Walks around the neighborhood. A trip to the farmer's market where he let me barter for rosemary and didn't laugh when I told the vendor his tomatoes looked like heartache. The first time he reached for my hand, it felt like exhaling. We didn't talk about Emery. He never asked, and I never volunteered. Not yet. That story was still mine. Still fragile in places. But I knew something was changing. Not because I needed someone, but because I finally knew I didn't. Meanwhile, Emery tried again. I got another message. This time, longer. "Laurel, I know I handled things poorly. I'm not asking for us to go back. I'd like to be able to talk. Like people who shared a life." I stared at the message for a long time. I hadn't forgiven him. Not really. But I wasn't angry anymore either. And maybe that was the bigger shift. I didn't respond right away. And when I did, it was short. "I hope you're healing." "I am." That was the last time we communicated. And somewhere in that quiet, something new began. Not a new love story. A new chapter in mine. Summer drifted into fall. I started waking up before the sun, slipping into cardigans and brewing stronger coffee. The rhythm of life was quiet, steady. Jamie and I were easy. Nothing rushed. We still hadn't defined it. And for the first time in my life, that felt okay. Business was good. Word of mouth had picked up again, especially after the panel. I was consulting on 2 mountain homes and a small bookstore downtown, owned by a retired librarian who reminded me of my grandmother. I kept busy, but not distracted. I no longer needed to keep moving just to avoid stillness. One Thursday afternoon, I was sitting at the Drip Bean, the cafe down by Biltmore Avenue. I had blueprints laid out across the table, headphones in, half listening to piano jazz. That's when I saw her. Nola. She looked smaller than I remembered. Hair still dark, but pulled back in a way that seemed less deliberate. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too big, and her heels were scuffed. She didn't notice me at first. But I noticed her. She ordered, waited, and as she turned, her eyes caught mine. For a split second, her face froze. Then she approached. "Laurel," she said, her voice barely above the cafe's noise. "Hi." I took one earbud out. "Nola." She hesitated. "I didn't know you'd be here." I gestured to the seat across from me. "It's a public cafe." She sat down. Just like that. "I heard about your work," she said. "The bed and breakfast in Black Mountain." I nodded. It turned out beautifully. A pause. Her fingers toyed with the sleeve of her coat. "Look, I don't expect you to care, but things with Emery, you don't owe me any explanation," I interrupted gently. "Whatever happened between you two isn't my concern." She looked surprised. Maybe she expected me to lash out. Maybe she thought I was still holding the same pain she helped inflict. I thought he was different," she said finally. I gave a small, cool smile. "We all did once." Another pause. "I'm starting over," she added. "Trying to figure out what's next." I nodded. "Then I wish you clarity. That's more useful than luck." She looked at me for a long time after that. Not with pity. Not with guilt. Just the uneasy realization that I was nothing like the woman she may have imagined. I wasn't broken. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't chasing anyone's apology. I'd already taken back everything that mattered. Later that week, I received an invitation, an alumni gathering for Emery's old firm. I had no reason to go, except for one. It was being hosted at the new event space I'd recently finished designing. A massive reclaimed wood loft just outside of town, perched on a hill with panoramic views of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The irony wasn't lost on me. I RSVP'd. Not to make a scene. Just to stand quietly in the place I built. The night of the event, I wore a simple black dress and a gold cuff bracelet Mira had given me last Christmas. Jamie dropped me off, kissed my cheek, and said, "Go get M." Inside, I mingled with a few familiar faces. People I hadn't seen in years. They complimented the space. Asked if I still worked in interiors. "I own the firm now," I said. "Laurel Wade and Company. We handle full-scale restorations, design, and sourcing." Their eyebrows lifted. Impressed. Curious. And then, Emery walked in. He hadn't seen me yet. I watched from across the room as he shook hands, smiled in that polished, automatic way. But there was a strain in it now. A hollow in his cheeks that hadn't been there before. He looked around the space like he was trying to remember why it felt familiar. That's when someone told him. I could see the moment the realization hit. His mouth tightened. His eyes scanned until they landed on me. I didn't look away. He walked over slowly. "Laurel," he said, like my name still held weight for him. "This is your work?" I took a sip of champagne. "Every inch." He nodded once. "It's incredible." "I know." There was a pause. "You've really built something here." I tilted my head. "Yes." And I didn't need to step on anyone to do it. His expression changed, just subtly. A flicker of something behind the eyes. Regret, maybe. Or recognition. He knew he was standing in a space I made beautiful with my hands, my ideas, my vision. And none of it belonged to him. "Well," he said quietly, "I hope you're doing well." "I am," I replied simply. He waited a beat longer, as if hoping I'd ask about him. I didn't. I walked away first. That night, after I got home, I curled up in my reading chair with a blanket and a tea. Jamie sat across from me, legs stretched out, book in hand. The fireplace crackled. The windows were dark. "Good night," he asked. I looked at him, the warm glow lighting his features. The man who had come into my life not to rescue me, but to meet me where I stood. "It was," I said. "It really was." And so, there it was. Not the ending I once imagined when I was 23 and standing in a gas station holding daisies, but one that felt far more earned. I didn't lose my life. I reclaimed it. I didn't destroy his world. I rebuilt mine in plain view. And when he finally saw it, saw what I had become, that was enough.